Good afternoon, distinguished board members and staff. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been asked to come and interact with the youngsters in your school area, and so far it's been a pleasure to interact with those youngsters. My history, on a brief note, started in a high school, similar to what you have here. In a school called St. Augustine, I was caught making noise, and as a punishment, I was asked to add numbers from 1 to n. And the first week I did that, I sweated, because the last number was large. The next week they caught me again and they gave me the same punishment, except the ending number was larger. By the third week of the same punishment, I developed a formula to ease my pain. And the formula was, if n was the last number, I would divide that by 2, then multiply by n plus 1. And so it allowed me to do the punishment, of course. With that successfully done and proven mathematically, my discipline teacher stopped the punishment because it made it possible for me to give the answer right quick. Then, of course, he called me to the office and said to me, "Do you realize what you've done?" And I said, "Well, I've just found a shortcut to your punishment." But he said, "No, beyond that." And I said, "No." He said, does the name Gauss mean anything to you? G-A-U-S-S. And I said, "No." And so, well, he, along with Newton and Euler, are considered the most famous mathematicians of all time. And that Gauss came into that fame by developing the same formula. So I asked him for a book on Gauss, which he gave to me. And I read, and it was like he said. Then I went further, and I read more about Newton. And I read more about Albert Einstein. That's where I got started. I was already doing fairly well in geometry. As a matter of fact, they coined a name for me eventually, after that formula development, calculus, by my colleagues. But I was very interested in geometry. I love proofs. So when I discovered that relativity was geometry, it was fun. Then I also found out that E is equal to mc squared came out of that geometry of transformation. It was fascinating. I also learned that Einstein's colleague, Henrik Lorentz, was the second person to get a Nobel Prize in physics. He was also a geometry type. I was fascinated. Then, of course, Albert Einstein would go to relativity theory, general relativity theory, to figure out the gravitational force that keeps the planets in motion. And he was on his way to actually formulating the unification of all the forces of the universe. But stopped because he passed on in 1955 and left the problem uncompleted. So I made a vow to pursue the finding of the solution to that problem. But he left a hint that helped me. That hint was, he said, this problem is pretty difficult, but I believe in my guts as I'm passing on to see my creator that the solution lies in geometry. So I went over my geometry and searched, and eventually the solution came up, and we published that with the American Mathematical Society reviews and the rest of the world. And we were fortunate to have been nominated for a Nobel Prize in physics, mathematical physics. But I've been on the road ever since then, trying to talk to youngsters like the ones that I'm talking to over here. So that's basically my story.